Now, today, let's move away from all of the, we'll stay with it, but today, let's talk something else. You know, some company discussions and all. United Capital Infrastructure Funds, a SEC-licensed infrastructure debt fund operated by leading Pan-African Financial Services Group, United Capital PLC, has announced a strong financial performance for year ended December 31st, 2025, delivering a gross return of 24.62% and consistently outperforming comparable market instruments. The fund recorded a total income of 3.06 billion naira in full year 2025, representing a 54.5% year-on-year increase, driven by strong performance of its diversified infrastructure loan portfolio. This significant growth in fund performance underscores the growing role of private capital in financing critical infrastructure projects across Nigeria's key economic sector. Since its inception, UCIF has now distributed a total of 6.19 billion naira to qualified unit holders and reaffirming its commitment to providing regular and sustainable income to investors. During the 2025 financial year, the fund further strengthened its governance framework by onboarding 4 seasoned professionals to the investment committee, bringing extensive expertise in infrastructure finance, transaction advisory services, impact investing, and corporate governance. My guest is Mr. Uchenna Nkparu. He's the Chief Investment Officer and Fund Manager, United Capital Infrastructure Fund. Thank you so much. It's good to have you live in the studio, Mr. Uchenna.
Thank you so much, Tolu. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great stuff, I must say. Considering our infrastructure gap, the deficit that we face as a country, you know, as someone who manages a fund specifically designed to address this gap, I'd like you to describe the state of infrastructure financing in Nigeria today, and why does private capital play a critical role in this?
Very strong question. We know the infrastructure deficit in Nigeria.
Yes.
And that's across power, it's across transportation systems, aviation infrastructure.
Yes.
Even in telecoms, where we've seen a lot of growth, you still find large percentages of the population having limited connectivity. So the infrastructure demand is obvious. The question then is, why? Why should any private capital provider be interested in providing funding towards infrastructure? Simple answer is that the market has changed. Over time, Nigerian government, and you know, when you think infrastructure, you have to think of a strong role of government. Government has taken a number of very good steps. The Electricity Act being one of them. And amongst other things, one of the things that Act does is to say, you have people who can potentially pay more for electricity than others. And these people who can pay more are premium customers. You can charge them a different tariff, which is attractive for a private investor. So just think about anyone in Band A who is paying a premium is perhaps an attractive person that you want to fund. Now, beyond electricity, there are other spaces. Gas, there's a lot happening there. The Petroleum Industry Act of 2023 was transformational for that space. So before now, you have Nigeria as a country, because a lot of our foreign revenues come from crude oil production. But you'll find that a lot of those producers were flaring gas. And government said that is money that's being wasted. How do we capture that gas, monetize it, and ultimately even export it? So these are the things that are driving a lot of private capital participation, and these are the sectors that we are keen to invest in.
Interesting stuff, because I sometimes I think there was a report where the IMF and World Bank were talking about the kind of investment we need to bridge our infrastructure gap, I think over the next 10 years, you know, I see specifically power and some other segments. But can you give us more insights into this funds for those that want to understand, and what are the primary motivations behind the establishment?
So you've laid the background. So we had studies done, I think as far back as 2015, that said, over the next 30 years, Nigeria will need an average of $100 billion in investments in infrastructure across the country. So $100 billion every year, which means that any year as a nation, we don't meet up to $100 billion, that effect compounds. So the next year, you have what was a shortfall for the previous year, and then the 100 for this year, and on, which ultimately presented an opportunity. So in 2020, our board took a strategic decision to say, look, we as United Capital have extensive experience raising capital for government and public sector institutions that have been doing infra and infra-related projects. Why don't we put our money where our mouth is, which is one, establish a fund that we will invest in and then attract other like-minded investors into that fund. So that started that journey. Started in 2020, and we ultimately then launched the United Capital Infrastructure Fund in 2021. What did we launch this fund to do? To look into the market, find projects that are very bankable, very attractive, and need the financing, and invest in those projects such that the returns that come from that project is something that ourselves, United Capital, as investors, but also our investing public get the benefit of enjoying from. And since we launched that now, our fund has now gone live. Over the last 4 years, we've invested in power, we've invested in renewable energy, we've invested in industrial recycling. And we see that those investments have been generating very, very attractive returns, very competitive returns, which is why we're able to say, oh, in your introduction, you said we're outperforming comparable instruments. Without a doubt, we are. And that comes to the quality of the investments that the fund has made since inception.
All right, let's take this commercial break. In Business Nigeria, and we're looking at infrastructure funding and what United Capital is doing differently. We see a remarkable performance. I have in the studio Uchenna Mkparuwa. He's the Chief Investment Officer and Fund Manager at United Capital Infrastructure Fund. And we've been talking extensively around there's a challenge we face as a country and how to walk through it. Now, I saw the report, and the headline gross return 24.62%, total income 3.06 billion naira. Well, this is remarkable. Now, what specific sectors or assets in your portfolio delivered the strongest performance?
So it's very interesting that you say so. Across our portfolio, we continue to see that power, renewable energy, and industrial recycling. One also emerging area is agribusiness. And it's strange because we say, oh, well, is agriculture so attractive? Yes. Over the last 4 years, we continue to record very high growth in export and export-related commodities across cocoa, across cashew, across sesame seed. These are areas that we are now trying to do even more in terms of investment. Our power portfolio, very good time to be investing in power, like I said earlier, because the tariffs have now reflected a tariff that is commercially attractive. Renewable energy, another big area. Whilst, you know, there are plans across the country to have big power plants, you find that there are opportunities for smaller modular systems where you install a solar mini grid that is powering a specific asset that is able to generate a decent return. So we find that across each of our portfolio segments, there's been very, very attractive returns on investment. More recently, we are now in the process of closing out our investments in gas, and gas is a hot area, very, very hot. What is driving that is that globally we find there's a big push where everyone says we want to have cleaner sources of energy.
Energy transition.
Energy transition is driving that. And that gas usage is across automobile, it's across power plants, and it's for so many other industrial uses as well. So each of our portfolio segments continues to rival each other, and it's the aggregate of all of that that is giving us the kind of return that we're generating.
Great stuff. But personally, I still think that there's still more investment for us in our grid area and all of that, and while we also look at cleaner energy and all of that. But maybe we'll still touch on that as we move on. Now, you also strengthened your investment committee, onboarding 4 new seasoned professionals. Now, why is this priority for you?
Again, everything we do at United Capital is driven by strategic direction. 3 years ago, we took a direction that we will become a Pan-African outlook. What that meant is that we'll suddenly start to find ourselves operating in so many other areas. And so from last year, that dream has now started to germinate fruit. And so our board took a strategic decision, looked at the infrastructure fund and said, we even want this fund to now start to have a Pan-African outlook, meaning that it should be able to invest in projects all across Africa the way it is doing in Nigeria. Amongst other things, what does that mean for us? It means that, A, we need to raise the bar of our very high governance structure, but put even more governance mechanisms into that. And so the board went through a process of selecting 4 very qualified infrastructure experts who have been doing infrastructure across Southern Africa, in the UK, One of them had experience across both Nigeria and Northern America. And these are the sort of professionals that were then added to the investment committee to drive the fund's decision-making and support our expansion.
So really, what does this mean for the UCIF?
So it means that, for starters, the already very strong governance structure is now even much stronger. It means that the quality of our investment decision-making has been further enhanced. It means that the quality of our investee companies has been raised higher. Ultimately, it means that the fund is positioned to deliver even better returns.
Impact investing and future outlook. Let's talk about impact investing, which has gained momentum in Nigeria and globally, particularly with infrastructure, within the infrastructure space. Now, what factors do you believe are driving this rise? Why is it becoming increasingly attractive to Nigerian investors?
So if you look across Nigeria, you find that where everyone thinks about investing primarily just for profit, there is also secondary benefits in investing in certain areas, right? There are reasons why foreign capital pools continue to come here, because the growth potential in Nigeria, perhaps more than other parts of Africa, is much higher. And so when you think about impact investing, what you're essentially trying to say is, I want to invest profitably, but I want to translate that into real economic benefits. So when we closed our investment in 2023 in a power plant, right, one of the key assets that power plant was going to support was a healthcare facility that had equipment that they had never run. They had owned that equipment for over 18 months, never run it. Why hadn't they run it? Because you needed to keep that equipment cool at a particular cooling temperature.
Okay.
And if you didn't have steady and reliable energy, and you turned on that equipment and the power went out and it became overheating, you would shut it down. So that investment was, yes, it was going to generate a good return, but we could tie a direct linkage to improved access to healthcare. And so impact investing now is saying, how do we use capital to make profit, but also translate to real benefits, improvement in livelihoods, improvement in household incomes, and these are parameters we now work into how we appraise opportunities for investment.
Additionally, let's look ahead. Where do you envision the United Capital Infrastructure Fund, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I can speak very, very immediately, right? Ever since our results came out, we've been overwhelmed with inquiries about how can we invest, when can we invest. So we do have another offer coming to the market imminently, where we're looking to raise even more money to invest in similar types of assets that we have done this year. We expect that that will happen before the end of the month of April, and so we're inviting the members of the public to come join us. Now, over the next 5 years, what do we expect? We expect that United Capital Infrastructure Fund will lead in delivering big ticket infrastructure projects in this country. We need big rail projects that will move goods from Lagos to the hinterlands up country. We want to finance things like that. We need big power plant projects. We need to reinforce our grid. And so we expect that United Capital will be at the forefront of leading those kind of infrastructure projects.
That's really big, I must say. But nice stuff. Let's keep a tab on all of this and your activities. I've been speaking to Uchenna Nkparu. He's the Chief Investment Officer, Fund Manager, United Capital Infrastructure Fund. Thank you so much. Nice chat with you.
Thank you, Toby.
It's really good to
have you here.